welcome to Women in DevOps, the Evolution of DevOps event. Again, thank you for funding Circle. Honestly, very grateful to be here. It's a lovely, lovely space. Before we kick off, JFrog are our annual sponsors. They do really amazing things for us. They send people like yourself to events. They help with a whole host of things. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight, but they are going to give away some lovely giveaways, and hopefully some keeps you encouraged to keep coming. Super, super proud for them to be a sponsor. Tonight's giveaway is an Apple HomePod mini speaker, fresh from the Apple Store today. Today it was delivered. It's free to enter. There is no catch. It's just to say thank you for being here and thank you for supporting the community. All you got to do is scan this QR code. That's it. There really is no catch. And the winner will be revealed during tonight's event, and you will go home not only with an extra tote bag to give to your co-worker or your partner tomorrow, but this brand new HomePod mini, I don't know what it does. It's like Google Alexa, but Amazon Alexa, but better. So do make sure you put the QR code and you enter. If you have any problems with this, we'll put it up again at the end. Or circulate it. Thank you. Cool. Second giveaway is a 3-minute survey. It's 3 minutes of your time, basically to win a Nintendo Switch, and the winner will be announced first week of May. If you are watching online, I'm really sorry you can't participate in either. So you are the pleasure of your own home, but yes, so the winner will be announced first week of May. We do have a lovely JFrog speaker here today. Cool. So we love a word cloud. Does anyone not know what a word cloud is? It's about to find out. More QR codes. This is QR code. I should have put this in the disclaimer. Must like QR codes. If you now QR code this QR code, it's going to ask you a question and we're going to kick off. So the agenda tonight is this is our lovely panel. We're going to have a Q&A and then we'll break for food and for more networking. We do have a code of conduct. We're really proud of our code of conduct, and we like that everyone here follows this code of conduct as well. The idea behind Women in DevOps is that we participate in authentic, in fair, and an equitable way. We always exercise consideration and respect in your speech and your actions. That is in networking, and that's during the Q&A and part of the panel. Panelists, that includes you. Please do refrain, or just do not at all, from any demeaning, discriminatory, harassing behavior or speech, and please be mindful of your surroundings community. This is a community. We love all of you and want every single person to feel super safe in this room. Any questions, please ask. That's okay to conduct. We are Women in DevOps. There's a lot of new faces in here, which I love. I'm the founder. Nice to meet you. My name's Lauren Langdell. Next week, we are 6 years old. Thanks. 6 years old. There's a couple of people in this room who've been coming for at least 5 years. So, John, glass on the head, that one, has been an amazing advocate. So it's an amazing community that's done many, many things, but we strive to advocate for all underrepresented groups from the tech space with a particular focus on intersectionality in DevOps. And thank you for being here. Now, I'm not the star of the show, even though I keep talking. These four are. This is our amazing panel. We are very, very grateful to have them tonight. I'm going to do a quick introduction and then introduce yourself. Should have prepped you before. If you don't speak into this mic, no one at home can hear you. So we have Zainab from Funding Circle.
Hi. Wait, can you hear? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Phyto from DevOps.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Opara-Nadi, and I'm the head of developer experience and operational excellence at 10x. 10x is a banking as a service platform that supports tier 1 banks and allows them to service their customers 10 times quicker, 10 times everything. Thank you.
I'm Tamara Miner. I'm a strategy consultant currently, or freelancing actually, for a company called Pragma Platform, which does game engine and platform services essentially for various different game studios. Prior to that, I was VP of engineering at a company called Disguise, which does media and entertainment servers.
Perfect. We will come back to you two, don't worry. Okay, cool. Whilst we're learning about these lovely Zainab and Phyto, should we do the word cloud now? Lucy? Great. More QR codes, people. That's what we love to hear. Zainab, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you do at Funding Circle and all the great work?
Yes, so I am currently a DevOps engineer at Funding Circle. We're basically focusing on making the experience of software developers like as amazing as possible so that they can deliver as fast as possible whilst keeping our platform as stable as possible. So we really work close with our product engineers to kind of cater to their needs, find solutions that actually make a difference in their day-to-day, and do everything from like infrastructure to like really understanding the application to provide the best infrastructure for them. I can go into more detail, but is that?
We're going to go into tons of detail
Yeah.
tonight.
But that's basically, that's the be and end all of my role.
Excellent. Before we Phyto, go into all the cool stuff you do at JFrog, and I love the cool t-shirt, by the way. Privileged to have one of those. Yeah, if you just scan this QR code, we love a platform called Slido here. It means that you can participate in the Q&A. It doesn't matter how shy you are, your question will still get answered. We'll build a word cloud and we'll come back to this. Yeah, over to you.
Hi. Okay. So JFrog provide an ecosystem to help organizations manage their software supply chain from start to finish, pretty much. Looking at all the sort of different tool sets they've got, managing the code base, vulnerabilities, licensing. I've been in the DevOps space for nearly 20 years now. Oldest of you in this room, I think. I've seen it grow from being a slow monolithic environment to what it is today. I've seen that transition painfully happen. And now today I'm in competitive intelligence, looking at all the vendors in the space, what they do, how they achieve it, are they bringing new technology to market, and then obviously how we compete against that as well.
Excellent, good stuff. So we are here to discuss the evolution of DevOps. So what we want to start off with before we dive into Q&A and panel is, what does the word DevOps mean to you in 2023? It means something very different in 2016, 17, 18, 19. We want to know, what does it mean to you? So panelists, you might want to turn around. If you can't see, there are televisions up here. But what we've got up here, we've got collaboration, magic, I like that one, philosophy, self-service, mentoring, engineering experience, security first, the norm, getting things out there, infrastructure, fun. DevX, interesting, we're going to come back to that. Unix ops like it was in 2010. Sean, was that you? Thriving future, I love it. We'll keep this up for a few more seconds before we join, but this is good stuff. This is interesting. We're going to delve more into this and hear from our panelists shortly. We'll also send this round after the event as well, so you can use it and get your opinions from your teams. But cool, so let's kick off then. Oh, I don't like seeing myself. Feel famous. Excellent. So let's talk then. And sorry for the old school paper, by the way. My iPad has low charge. So how can DevOps teams then? How can DevOps teams balance the need for speed? JFrog, need for speed, is that wasn't planned. Need for speed with the need for security in today's evolving threat landscape.
So it's one word, automation, to be honest. That really drives how it is. Developers need to understand what they're developing, how safe and secure that is before they start. With obviously JFrog platform plus others, it's understanding what the developers have got, what they start to develop with, and building upon them. If they find out too late, you have to go back. It costs money, it costs time, it reduces your development processes, it slows down your application probably, or application release. So you automate the whole process. Getting that right, though, is the difficult part. You've got your lawyers and your legal team looking at one thing, but your security team looking at something different. Your architects have got a different opinion. Putting those together is the balance, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Sam, we've spoken about this a lot recently, haven't we? Because you're itching for the mic.
We have, yeah. And actually, since we spoke, so I have a good friend who's been in the infosec industry for a while at various companies, and so we had a really good conversation about that. So I wanted to share her insights as well as my thoughts on this. So DevSecOps is like a big term these days that you'll hear being thrown around, and I think for me, I'm always talking with my teams about, you need to make sure that security is something that's underlying as a foundational aspect of your development. And that's something that you need to care about just the same as like incident management or all of those things that, any engineer at your company needs to care about. But it was interesting because my friend was saying that she hates the term DevSecOps. And the reason is because it makes it sound like security is just one and done as soon as you have a DevSecOps tool in place, which usually, you can integrate it with your CI/CD, and like there's a lot of really good tools out there. And they are really beneficial, and I think you should have them because it's a nice way to automate that and have continuous integration and security as part of that. But it's not the only thing that you should do. Because security is a lot bigger than that. You have to think about your environment as far as, perimeter testing and making sure you don't have vulnerabilities there, making sure you're doing pen testing, which usually means you should get a third party to come in and do that. So it's a lot more than just one thing. And it really does need to be end to end. That's my thought.
I like it. I like both your answers, actually. I agree with them. And one thing that we've done at 10X is realize that, like you said, it's bigger than just what you put in the pipeline. It's bigger than, scanning your vulnerabilities as part of your build process. So we have the concept of what we call security champions, where we have champions that work within the feature teams that get direct training from the security team. Security team being a small function, it's really difficult for them to support the entire engineering organization. So what the security champions do is they bring that learning and they take the questions that the engineers have into their meetings with the security teams. What this means is that we're thinking about security as an end-to-end process, like you mentioned, right from when we're taking in work, when we're planning, as we think about how are we going to implement this? Is this going to be a new microservice? We're also thinking, what are the security considerations? And are there new quality gates that we need to put in place? Because you can grow very much faster with DevOps and automation, but that means how much faster you're going. You're going faster into more risk. You're going faster into breaking compliance. And you're going faster into, putting your customer or your client or whoever is depending on your software in a situation that they don't want to be in.
That has an inherent risk as well. So organizations look at risk in very different ways. Some people will take the risk of leaving vulnerabilities in their software because they can afford to fine, but it won't damage the brand, or it doesn't. So I can mention one company. I can't mention one company, but specifically they were like, I'll best not say that. No. So years ago, I was working with a client in the UK, very big, and they had a spreadsheet, and they basically put in risk factors: is if this happens, what's the damage to the brand, and what's the damage financially? If it doesn't meet this criteria, we don't care. We're going to release this anyway, because we can afford to pay it off. It won't damage our brand. If it damaged the brand above level 5, for example, on their spreadsheet, that was when they stopped and fixed the vulnerabilities or fixed the issues, the legal compliance, whatever the issue may have been. So how they evaluate risk changes with each organization as well.
Anything to add?
I feel like with everything that everyone said, there is, I guess, little to add, just apart from reiterating the idea that security has to be a continuous thing that's always on your mind as part of your design when you're testing to release. And we shouldn't divide it from our kind of day-to-day work, because that's when we can lead to trouble.
So question, alongside being founder of Women in DevOps the last 6 years, been a DevOps recruiter by trade. No one throw anything at me. for, well, it wasn't DevOps like 8 years ago, right, for the last 6 years. But from what I've seen, both in North America and the UK, is like this increase for like DevSecOps engineers. So if we're hating the term DevSecOps, right, and we're talking about all of these things, why do you think that's on the rise?
I think the immediate thing that comes to mind is we're trying to transition into this, or I guess organizations are trying to embrace a DevOps culture, and DevOps engineers or DevX engineers, SREs are usually advocates for doing the right thing. And so I think because we're already in that consultative role where you're trying to like train people to do better and be better, it's almost easier to kind of add more to scope because they're probably already thinking about it anyway. So it's almost like maybe a formalization and more explicit way of being like, yeah, let's make this a thing that, you know, security is more at the forefront because it already is. Like, let's make it official. I think that's my like opinion. Does anyone else have anything else they want to?
Thank you. I agree. And I love that that's a cultural shift that's happening because I think that's really important. In addition to that, I would say it's also about legislation because security is so tightly tied to things like data protection, data privacy, and with GDPR, and there's a bunch of other legislation that's coming out. Like even California has a very specific data privacy legislation that's come out. You need to have those things in order to be compliant. And so depending on your industry, you're going to need that. And those things are very tightly coupled because usually when a company is asking about data privacy, they're also going to be asking about security. And one of the things that I've been doing recently is actually answering security questionnaires for companies I never thought I would be asking or answering security questionnaires for. And, you know, I'm helping out with that because I'm helping create some of these processes around incident management and, you know, how do we do business continuity and disaster recovery, which includes backups and that sort of thing, as well as observability and monitoring and alerting, and all of that is tied together. And all of those end up being answers to questions on security questionnaires when some company is trying to land a deal with another company. You know, it's pain, not to make any disparaging marks. But it is kind of the new reality. So I think that's a big reason why those things are increasing.
I think as well, if you think about not DevOps the role, but DevOps the culture, the mindset. This is just as a technological society, I think we're coming to that cusp of, we realize that we need to bring DevOps closer together. We're now realizing that security should be in that mix because like you said, they cannot at the same time see that going together.
I'm showing my age now, but I remember developers, there was DevOps, then DevSecOps. I think security is exactly, it's just part of that culture. I mean, I used to sell software into organizations 15 years ago where security was just not even mentioned. It was an afterthought and they'd check it later when it's through QA and everything else. Now, and the developers didn't care 20 years ago either. It wasn't part of their culture. They just wanted to develop software and develop it well. And that was it. Whereas now, that is always part of that process and part of their sort of thinking of how they develop software. So I think it's just a natural progression. I think a few more years we'll find something else in there as well.
So let's talk about natural progression. I love reading, love a news article. Love reading Forbes, it makes me feel really intelligent. But Forbes in the last few months have claimed that the next digital revolution is already underway. So where do we think DevOps, look, I think it's pretty apparent that we don't all love that term anyway, but let's talk about what the digital revolution means for DevOps, and in particular DevX, because that is something that has been on my radar for the last 6 months. I know there's some very passionate people in this panel about DevX, and actually this is how Women in DevOps Funding Circle and DevX actually this event exists today, is because of that. So let's talk about DevX, the future of DevOps within that scenario. Ollie, the microphone's next to you, and I know you're incredibly passionate about this. We had a very, very good conversation about this last week. Very good. I've actually stolen some of your words since.
It's okay, not copyrighted them yet. So yes, I'm passionate about developer experience, and there's a reason for it. Zainab and I were talking earlier because she's a developer experience engineer. And and developer experience ultimately, I don't know if it's a commonly known term in the room, but ultimately your clients, your customers are engineers that work within your organization, and your job is effectively to make it easier for them to do what they do very well, quickly, etc. I like to add in sustainably, because for me, that's what DevX is about. So with DevOps, DevOps brought about a different way of thinking about being a software engineer. It wasn't enough to just know how to write programming language code. With DevOps, you also needed to know how to support your code in production, know how to run, how to maintain. You needed to know all of these other things that used to be handled by a different team or different teams, which means that the cognitive load that an engineer has grew exponentially. And the need for delivery didn't go down. We didn't say, now we're expecting engineers to do all of these things as part of their job, so we're gonna not deliver to our clients. No, we didn't say that. We said, we want you to do it. I know now you're doing automation, we want you to do it faster. So what developer experience is about is, how do we make it possible for engineers to do those things? How do we remove the toil and the friction? How do we automate the processes? How do we put in the guardrails? As much as we all, as engineers, most of us want to think, yes, we know everything that there is to know about our craft, it's virtually impossible. So the role that developer experience plays is, as technology advances, as we do more automation, as we do more security, it's human beings that we're expecting to do all of these things. So we need to also be conscious and cognizant of the capabilities that we give them to be able to do all of these things very well. I'm gonna have my debit.
Thank you. Thank you. Literally echo everything that Oge said. I think it is about focusing on those who are delivering the product to our customers, if you will. And generally trying to make their lives easier, and not just building DevOps tooling because DevOps think it's cool and it's the DevOps way. It's like, how do we actually tailor this so that there is less friction? Kind of pushing more, like making it easier for them to do the right thing in a way that's not going to break stuff, and it's still enabling them to go faster. And you don't really know what that is unless you're like on the ground with whether it's your product engineers, your feature engineers, your software developers, really like hearing their pain points and understanding what their issues are now, and working with them in like a iterative, agile DevOps way to make things better for everyone. I think that is very much key, and it makes a better work environment, and be able to make more money at the end of the day. Like if everyone's happier, having a better experience, it's genuinely, I think, like humans, as humans, we're able to do better and be better, I think.
That's a panel in itself, that comment. We could talk about that for the next hour. Sam, you've got anything to add on DevX?
I mean, honestly, I would just re-emphasize everything that Oge and Zainab said, because I 100% agree with it. And, I remember a few years ago leading a team that was the infrastructure team, and they kept saying comments here and there about, oh, well, we're not close to the customer, so blah, blah, blah. And they would make disparaging comments sometimes. And I sat them down. I was like, look, who's our customer? Our customer is the developers at the company. It doesn't mean that they're less important because they're not the customer who's paying us. They're the customer that's allowing us to get paid by building the product. And we need to enable them to do their job as best they can, as you two both said very eloquently. I remember at the time there were 5 different CI/CD tools that we had at the company, which was a little redundant, and not in a redundancy because of failover kind of way. So we initiated a project to actually combine those and move forward in a more effective way. And the reason that that ended up being effective was the engineer who was in charge of that project went and sat down with every dev team as part of their sprint and actually saw what their workflow was and why they chose one CI/CD tool over the next. And because of that, he got a greater understanding of how that developer or that development team wanted their experience to be. And so we were able to choose a tool, as Zainab was saying, based on what their needs are so that they were happy with it. Because otherwise, there's a lot of friction and you want to reduce that. So, yeah.
So with that in mind, then, so I think we can all agree that security is incredibly important. How do we therefore make security like a first class system, for lack of a better phrase, when implementing tools and also thinking about capabilities to support DevOps?
Since I have I'm just gonna
That's
say
what I was thinking.
like,
I was like, just roll with it, roll with your flow.
I mean, honestly, like I love Oge's idea from earlier because having that kind of security champion is a way to make sure that it's instilled in the teams. I've not personally implemented that, but I love it. I'm going to steal that. And otherwise, I think one of the things that I've done with smaller teams is just making sure that that's part of the definition of done. So when you're working on something, ideally you have some success criteria and things like that. That should include things like testing, and documentation and security. And if you have those things also included in your process automatically, then it makes it a bit easier to do. But I'm sure you have more to say on that because.
Well, I was going to touch on something that you actually mentioned in a previous response that you gave, which is there is one thing, okay, we want to do security or we want to do quality or we want to do pair programming, whatever it is. And we're doing DevOps, so we're going to have CI/CD tooling and we're going to have pipelines, etc. But where some organizations miss the mark is that they think about these as separate entities. So we are going to do build, and that's just going to give me an artifact. And then we're going to do deployment. And then at some point, we're going to do QA. And then at some point, we're going to do the security part. So when it comes back to developer experience, which I love, it's about how can we do all of these things and take the pain and the effort of doing it away from the individuals. There's so many things that you can automate, right? And it's not automating in silos or in isolation. It's not automating the security task. It's embedding the security as one of the guardrails. So if I to give a specific example, you pull checking your code into code repository, the build runs. As part of that build, you're going to run some automated tests on your service. You may run some end-to-end tests that are shared across environments. But you can also do your vulnerability scanning at that point. You can also do your container image scanning. You can also do internal dependency scanning. You can also check if the other artifacts that you're depending on internally have been signed already by your security verification. There are so many other things that you can do so that when you get the deployable artifact at the end of the journey, as a developer who wrote the code, they know that they have met that definition of done if all those things go green, without having to be bogged down with, oh, who do I contact to do this kind of scanning? And no, what does this feedback do? And there's so many things that you can do in between. Like one of the things that I'm been involved in recently is we know that we can have tools like Sneak that can do your dependency scanning, but that comes with an effort, which is if you do find a vulnerability in a dependency, you need to upgrade that dependency before you can, well, there is another tool called Renovate, which will do that dependency scanning for you and raise the PR. And so that you as the engineer, all you need to do is go, yes, I'm happy to merge this PR. Bob's your uncle, you move on. So, I mean, I could talk for hours about to how we make DevOps go faster whilst looking at the human element of developer experience. So
I think there's a podcast in that. We'll pick that up on a podcast.
So I don't want to sit here and say JFrog this and give you a sales pitch, but if I just sort of briefly explain what JFrog does in this instance. So as a developer looks for a binary, the JFrog Artifactory will look at it and say, here's the binary you've got. Here's the security vulnerabilities that exist within it. Here's the license. Is it good to use? Have your security team given it the okay? Does it violate a policy? Yes or no? The developer can then make a decision. Is this a binary I want to use? They use it, for example, they go through the development process, they go through the CI/CD, they create their artifact. At that point, we then scan it again. And we look at it and say, does this vulnerability that we know we told you was already there, is it actually exploitable? So we look at the contextual element is, this is a vulnerability. If you built it this way, it's exploitable. If you built it another way, it's not. So we look at the way you build the software and give you another report to say, actually, we knew this vulnerability was there, but because you built it in a certain way, it's no longer valid. So we're giving you the tick boxes across we haven't got it all covered yet, but we're getting there slowly. But we're trying to go across at every step of the way, right the way to the edge nodes now, as to, is this vulnerability active? Is it being included? And the developer knows at every step of the way if it was included in their code or not. There's more to do. There's always more to do. But I think we're getting there slowly. You know? That's not a sales pitch. That's sort of explaining how tooling is going to help.
I guess nothing much, but I think what everyone has very well said and demonstrated is that, again, stressing that if we're going to have a DevOps culture where everyone has to think about DevOps and security and all of this and delivering and like this cognitive overload, as you were saying earlier, I think we have to make it as easy as possible for them to not even, to the point they're not even having to think about security, but it is happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should think about security. I'm not saying that, but more that it's easy to do. I think that's like the key message, right? Yeah, we want, look, that is the goal. That is like the optimistic end goal. And again, as within like DevOps, as DevOps engineers, DevX engineers, SRE, we want to make it like a reality, right? Yeah. It's going to take some effort, but I think it's worthwhile in the long run.
Let's just throw you all off here. When thinking about AI, machine learning, is that a potential like threat to all the good work that you're doing?
I think my initial view is like yes and no. I guess yes, in that I guess we're able to see like what ChatGPT is doing, and you can be like, oh, give me a pipeline that does this, and this, and then it's producing code. So you could argue that, oh, do we need humans these days? But I think, at least from what I understand and from what I'm seeing, people are using AI to go faster, to make their lives easier. I think it's about adapting with AI and not kind of staying stagnant and making it easier for everyone to move at the same space that AI is pushing us at. If we're kind of inclusive about adopting AI and making sure that no one's left behind, then it can, if anything, unlock potential to do more and do different things and be more innovative. And so I think as much as it can be seen as a bit maybe scary that, oh, we're being replaced, I think if anything, we should use it to advantage to kind of accelerate to 10x. So yeah, not bad. I mean, sorry, I just thought, sorry, this is the second time I made this joke today. I'm really sorry. But yeah, I do work at Funding Circle, but yeah, that was funny. I don't know if anyone else.
I love AI. I think it's brilliant. Is it replacing the tool sets? No. I think some of the vulnerabilities recently that have sort of been discovered, they weren't bad coding. So it was a case of they was exploited because of a certain method that was used. So how's AI, its infinite possibilities? Yes. Would it have found it? Possibly. Who knows if it particularly did that algorithm? You just don't know. And there's always that element of humans tested stuff. Hackers are never going to go away. You know, they're always going to be here. They're always going to find things that everyone else misses. I think another tool in the tool set that we're going to need. Will it make things faster? Yeah, a lot faster, I think, over time. But I think it'll bring in itself other issues. I think it will highlight issues we never thought of. So developers will develop something, they'll build something and they'll go through QA, will go through all the testing, and then AI will go, what about this? And something we completely nobody thought of. I think that will just introduce another problem that we have to, not a problem, but another issue we have to find a solution to. whatever that may be. I mean, who knows? It's still in its infancy.
All right. I mean, I agree. I think it's something that, yes and no. It could be, it can be really beneficial, be part of the tool sets that we adopt. And in looking at even the differences between ChatGPT and GPT 4.0, it's like huge differences already, and it's like not that much time has passed. So I think it will be really incredible depending on how we harness it. But at the same time, there's also, there's a danger there. And, how are these data sets being developed? And like, there are some ethical concerns, which I don't know if we're going to get into, but there's that. But I know some folks in the DevOps space who have already tried to use ChatGPT to generate some scripts and stuff. And like for scripting and some basic things, like it saved them tons of time. But for some other things, like it's not actually good right now at writing code. So it's not going to really work very well for you. And like hearing about students using it to do their homework, it's like, well, that might be fine. But like if they're not learning, then what's the longer term cost there? Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, in summary, yes and no.
It's interesting you say that. My sister's 15 and I forced her to take computer science, GCSE, and they've just had to block it from the computer, from the server, along with all the the naughty websites, because they were using it for their homework. They were using it in their coding class for Python scripting.
I think this is the conundrum that we faced, I don't know, 15 years ago. No, I'm showing my age. I actually have a joke segue. When I started, a developer was someone that built houses. We were called programmers. But back to the AI question. I think it's the same conundrum that we had about 15, 17 years ago when, first we were programmers and then there was this new whole thing called software testing. And we had testers and it was all manual and we followed test scripts. Then about 5 to 7 years later, it was all about automation. And then the question was, oh my gosh, is test automation going to mean we're not going to need, quality analysts and all of that? And we're in 2023 and we still need quality analysts. At the very least, we're using the human manual intervention to do what's called exploratory testing today, which wasn't a problem we're trying to solve 15 years ago. Because 15 years ago, we're doing the things that were repetitive and mundane and rote. So this is where I think AI comes in, is AI will do for the industry what DevOps is doing for the industry, bringing that automation in, allowing people to move faster, but we're still going to need humans for the experience side of it. And I don't think that's going to get replaced anytime soon. We'll meet again in 5 years when GPT 5.0.
We'll set the date now.
GPT 5 will be talking about what's the role of a human in the DevOps industry.
Well, without this turning into a full-blown debate, right? Because ethics can be a sensitive topic in a good way and a bad way, right? And ethics and AI, great theme for a Women in DevOps event. Thanks for the idea. But let's talk about ethics, because briefly, at least, because I think it's important to touch on. I think it links in really nicely to what we've been talking about. As I said, I like reading. Recent article from nature.com, not a usual website. Basically, what they've been talking about is that they are arguing that it should be like compulsory for ethics to be embedded into like agile software development process. It's a word not said for a very long time. What do you think some of the most pressing ethical considerations are in software development today? Obviously, we've touched on them a little bit there, but is there anything else that you think we need to add in regards to what we should be embedding in regards to ethics? Is that too much of an in-depth question? Is that like a panel in itself? Do you need to have a break and come back, or? It is a big topic.
It is a big topic.
We can skip it.
I can see if we can scope it a little bit, narrow it down a bit. So we're talking about AI, we're talking about software engineering, we're talking about ethics. And when I think about AI specifically, so I've been doing some reading, not as much as you, but some. And when we talk about things like training data, you know, we know that there is bias in training data. And as a society, we start to get, you know, dependency on AI. We need to be very careful that we don't overlook that we don't overlook that as pretty as a solution looks, under the hood, it's not great yet. So whilst I think that, yes, this is a deep conversation, probably better after wine, but it's something that we as technologists should not forget about. It shouldn't be something that we come to as an afterthought. We should remember that inherently there is bias in everything that we do. There's bias in the software that we write. And when we have, when we build capabilities that allow us to move at such an accelerated pace, we're also accelerating that bias.
True, Zainab.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say that I think one thing that I've seen with the rise of AI in the last, like, I guess the duration of my career is like ethics advocates or like ethics experts or an ethics AI person within the business who's always analyzing, okay, what is the implications of what we're doing and how it's going to impact like our end user. I think in the same way that we have a DevOps champion, security champion, DevSecOps, something like, yeah. I think that's kind of the way we need to be going very quickly so that we can be kind of making sure that our patterns have ethics in mind. It's embedded within our like agile process as we're kind of doing our design and ideation. Ethics is at the forefront. Even here at Funding Circle, there's one person that comes to mind, like a software engineer, who was even, I guess it's up to us as engineers to make it a point that if we're developing products, like, is it accessible? Is it inclusive? And pushing those initiatives. It has to be done like on an almost personal level, but also like structural, systemic level. It has to be built into operating models because we're seeing how very quickly things are moving. It's best to act now before it's almost too late. And at least I can speak with Funding Circle. It's something that we're thinking of more and more, and hopefully it will like skyrocket the amount how we're, I guess, bringing ethics into what we do. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that definitely needs to be more at the forefront across the whole tech space.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the analogy that comes to mind is like with seatbelts and crash test dummies. And there's a great book that I can't remember the name of that talks about all the bias built into like every product because women are never part of the test group. And so, you know, airbags and stuff like that and crash test dummies, there weren't female sized or like female testing done. And so more women were dying and things like this. So I can't remember the name of the book. If anyone does.
Technically wrong, so I love to read.
Yes.
And the author is Sarah W.
Okay.
78% more likely to die in a car crash.
Yeah.
Told you I like reading.
Amazing. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. So there's that. And I think there's a lot of good examples there where like just bias isn't everything. And the other thing I would say is I love the idea of an ethics advocate. However, currently there's also a lot of like, you know, with the people team or like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all of those efforts that companies are jumping on the bandwagon there, which is great. But when you end up looking at, are those things actually being implemented? Are the engineering leaders or leaders of the company actually allowing initiatives that come from those things to be implemented? Or are they still optimizing for, well, you know, that's great. We have a learning and development budget, but we're not actually going to give you the time to utilize it because we need you to develop over time and do it faster. You know, so I think with the ethics side of it, it's like, if we have that, that's great, but it better not just be a checkbox exercise. We need to actually utilize it. Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now.
I agree with you all. I think the issue is time. That's what it boils down. 20 years ago, no one thought of license compliance or securities. 15 years ago, everyone thought of license compliance. 10 years ago, security was part of it. It's an evolution of time. The more things we include, the slower development is going to take. And again, right now it's about speed. So there's a balance, and it should be included 100%. It'll just take time.
So what we're saying is what we should do is get a bottle of wine and talk about diversity and inclusion, ethics, and speed. Right, well, look, we've got one more theme left, which is the future. I imagine everyone's very hungry. I did promise you all the best Lebanese food in town. I tell you, Antic Funding Circle will not disappoint. The theme tonight's QR codes. We want to know, what DevOps trends do you foresee in 2024 and beyond? Spoiler alert, that's the theme for the next section. But yeah, I want to know what you think we're going to be seeing over the next year. Whilst our lovely audience are doing this and jumping the word cloud, just 1 or 2 word answers. I'll go back with Zainab. What do you think?
Home-shaped engineers. That was can I expand on that? Just that I think we're going to be all doing more, and I think have more varied skill sets. I think the whole point of DevOps is that everyone does DevOps eventually. So I think that is the future that comes to mind, where we're thinking about not just development or not even just DevOps, but everything working together to kind of provide a better future. That was not too right, I'm sorry, but yeah.
Coming from a tooling background, I want to see more integrations, also cybernetic type stuff as well. I think that's the way of the future. Personally, I think it will come at some point. Implants of chip and pins in your hands. I think all that's going to come. Maybe not our lifetime, but I think the advancements are already there. They're going to start to make it out to market soon. We've already seen some guy in Australia had his underground thing put into his arm, which was quite cool. He got fined for it, but he did it anyway.
In the immediate 2024, I reckon the rise of developer platforms. So internal developer platforms, because as I've worked with teams, what a lot of companies have done is there's a separate ops team, there are separate dev teams. Let's now create a one team, the DevOps team. But as you embed these philosophies into the ways of working, you find that innovation comes from everywhere, not just from the DevOps team. And one way to enable that innovation is using internal developer platforms, which allow developers to contribute and to have data and metrics and capabilities at their fingertips to be able to do the DevOps and seg stuff.
I mean, maybe this is a bit of a cop-out answer, but I do feel like AI is going to come into play a lot more, especially when we're talking about making scripting and things like that move a lot faster, and some of those mundane jobs that folks in DevOps teams hate doing. Like, we don't all want to be YAML farmers, so that will probably be a thing. I mean, we're already starting to see more people use it, so that trend will probably continue.
Some good answers there. So what our audience thinks, we've got, turn yourself around, we've got clouds, DevOps married security. I'm getting married in 2024 as well, just in case anyone's interested. Telling anyone that will listen. Distributed system, security, confusion. Platform engineering up there, holistic, serverless, Lambda. Cybernetics. Did I pronounce that correctly? Integration. AI removes DevOps. We're all out of jobs. Wavy, chaos, debate. There's a lot of trends there, but I think some really kind of like similar sort of themes, which is good. We're all on the same page. That helps. But look, talking about the future then, and again, we'll share this with you all as well. You can go back to the office tomorrow and ask your colleagues. Great water fountain chat if you're not remote. But without highlighting anyone's age, assuming you've all got LinkedIn, Tam, how long have you been in tech for?
Like almost 20 years.
Ran up to 20. Okay.
Just over 20.
Yeah, so we're on about 60, and then Zainab.
I'm nearly 30 years.
Okay, so 30 plus 20,
In depth,
50, 70. Just
I guess in tech, almost 5 years.
so about 75 years worth of experience here. That's pretty epic, isn't it? That's a lot of knowledge, a lot of amazing stuff. Okay. What I want to know, and what I hope as well, that everyone's learned something, you can take something away. But what advice would you give to someone that's hoping to kickstart their career in DevOps? And I want you to think about that, not just like as a graduate or someone who's coming out of school, who's learning through other means, but perhaps they're a career changer, perhaps they're in a different element of tech, so holistic sort of advice. Because hopefully we're all advocates in this room, and to go away and to speak to our peers, our friends, our families, our co-workers about getting into this space. An exciting theme to 2024. We want to be here for it. So yeah, what's your advice then for anyone looking to get into DevOps?
I think always be open to learning, and like don't stop learning, because I think the industry is always changing. With AI, it's going to change even faster. And I guess if you're just beginning, be open to understanding the whole kind of end-to-end experience. All experience is good experience, I think, because you might start off even just being like doing testing, but it will really open your eyes to kind of the wider picture. And the more you learn, the more you can connect things. So kind of, yeah, I think open-minded to learning, and all experience is good experience.
So don't pigeonhole yourselves, broaden your horizons. I mean, I'm going back to Y2K, year 2000, when the switch over to Midnight happened, and we had to employ how many developers in old programming languages that nobody else is bothered to learn anymore. So obviously, keep your horizons open. Keep your mind expanded to broaden to what you think and what you're doing. Don't just focus on one language. Don't focus on one industry or one product. Do as much as possible.
In addition to that, I would say find a community and find a mentor. Don't try to do it by yourself, because that can be really hard.
All of the above. And no, that won't be just my answers. I think two things come to mind in particular. One is don't just look at the shiny thing. Like, Kubernetes came out, and like cloud native is great. Don't get me wrong, but there's a time and a place for that new shiny thing. And if you don't understand the reasons behind why you're going to put it in place, then it might not be the right choice. And I think a lot of organizations, especially startups, tend to be like, oh, this thing's really shiny, so I'm going to go work on that. Or if an engineer wants to learn a thing, if they want to learn that thing, then they'll implement that thing, even if that thing is not the right thing to implement. So think about the value that you're trying to implement and make sure that your solution maps to that value. And then, well, you kind of said this already, but I would just emphasize networking, and you're doing it because you're here. But I cannot overstate how important networking is. Like, it's got me most of my jobs. And just, yeah.
One thing down on top of that is choose your companies carefully. Don't just jump for the dollars. Some companies will pay you a lot of money, but then they're going to give you no environment to work in. A lot of companies now, they've got programs in place for developers, for open source projects, or all sorts of stuff. If you do well in those, the pay will come very quickly.
Just to add on that, everyone was saying stuff that was triggering in my mind. I think the importance of understanding the fundamentals. I think if I hadn't have understood what cloud computing was generally, a lot of what I'm doing wouldn't even make sense. So I think don't feel like, oh, you need to do the shiny thing, the new thing, but start from the ground up and then expand as you can, because it will help secure you as you kind of progress in your career.
Excellent. Some good advice there. I like the shiny thing actually. I think that's just good life advice in general. Just don't gravitate towards anything shiny. Excellent. Well, look, hopefully we've got time, small amount of time for Q&A. Before we jump to Slido and anyone at home, does anyone in the audience have any questions for our lovely panel? There are some questions behind you. Okay. I'm not very good at PE.
Thank you. I have so many points, but I must be greedy. But I'll begin with the disclaimer that I've been in computing since 1969.
Yeah, exactly.
So, on your first question, what does DevOps mean to you? Nobody mentioned anything about improving code quality, which to me is a fundamental of DevOps. The idea being fast feedback to developers, not fast product production. Second, internal development platforms, yes, because they operate on the principle the best way to get people to do the right things to make it easy. We all know devs like herding cats, and they'll all find their own little tricky ways of getting around things because they're creative guys. That's why you hire them, like guys and girls. That's why you hire them. Lastly, on AI. AI assimilates and exploits the work of others. Those others are going to start objecting. Indeed, did I read today that Reddit has just decided they're going to paywall their API to stop it being publicly applied AI? Would it not be ironic that the arrival of AI will actually start limiting our access to information? And by virtue of access to information being limited, it will introduce bias because you will be reduced, you'll have a reduced breadth of information available. That's not a nice thought. I have lots more.
Unless you wanted to add to any of that. That sounds like a bottle of wine and get to the pub sort of conversation.
As DevOps engineers not directly delivering product, it's sometimes hard to justify for the senior manager in having the existence of like DevOps teams or SREs in place. How would you what reasons would you give the senior management to keep these teams in place?
So, and this is not just a question about DevOps. This is a question that I have seen many times when I've led software engineering teams where we go, well, I'm an engineer, I'm writing code. How do I justify this thing that I want to do in this way to a manager or whoever's paying the bills? It's about understanding what the business cares about, right? What do you care about? Do you care about getting products to your customers quicker? Do you care about having a secure quality product? Do you care about having an environment that's collaborative where people can grow, people can learn? It's about understanding what does the business care about? Because there is nothing in my experience that I have come across that the business cares about that cannot be improved by having DevOps culture within that organization. So it's about how you shape the narrative, right? If they care about delivering faster, then show how DevOps can help them do that. If they care about standardization, show how you can implement that with DevOps. If they care about reliability, observability, whatever it is, automation. Because ultimately, remember that DevOps fundamentally is a mindset. Yes, we talk in terms of DevOps teams, but it's a mindset. So let's forget about the team. Let's talk about how do we embed this mindset? Well, we need people to coach the engineers to do this. We need people to build the tools that will allow the engineers to do this. We will need people to X, Y, Z, whatever problem we're trying to solve. And that is effectively what your DevOps team is. It's the team that solves that problem for that organization. Because in the abstract, it's not easy to justify, oh, can I have a budget to hire 7 people who are going to do blah, 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 blah. But when you translate it to what the business cares about, how much does it cost us every time we have an incident in production? How long does it take for a team to, their recovery time? What does that look like? Their lead time for changes, what does that look like? If you can get the monetary amount of that, and then you can say, by having people that can build X tool or having people that can do this type of coaching or that kind of coaching, we can reduce the rate of incidents by XYZ. That's the language that, business leaders understand. And then when you build a tool, you call it the DevX tool. But that comes after.
Do you like DevX?
No.
Cool. Conscious of time. Any more questions from listeners? Hang on. Oh, perfect. Okay. Saves me from running. Okay. Now that is a bottle of wine down the pub question. But do you want to give a really quick overview? Or do you feel like your question was answered? Of course. That's why we're here. It's Women in DevOps.
What do you do, Zainab? Well,
I guess what is a DevOps engineer? I think we're responsible for pushing DevOps culture, which means that we're delivering as fast as we can, but making sure that things are operationally sound. As you said, the code quality that we're actually the quality of the code we're pushing to production is good, and we're helping software engineers, basically coaching them on how to do their jobs in a way that allows for quality, reliability, and speed. So yeah, it's consultative. You are engineering solutions. You're helping. It's collaborative. It's all of that, and it will keep evolving. Exactly.
I just want to touch on one thing that you asked or you said, which if the people on the call didn't hear, is you're interviewing for a role, and they said, "Oh, you're currently a DevOps engineer," but someone said there's no such thing as DevOps. I think because I've said something similar to that sometimes, but it's a bit tongue in cheek because what I actually mean is it's a mindset, and at a lot of smaller companies, there's not budget for a headcount for a whole team of separate DevOps. And so to a lot of what Zainab was saying is that mindset gets, instilled in all of engineering. And so if a person is saying there's no such thing as DevOps, hopefully they're coming from that place of these things are really important and foundational and core to engineering. So everyone needs to care about it. So it shouldn't necessarily be its own team. But I think there's a lot of nuance in that, in company size and all sorts of other factors that come into it. But you had something you wanted to add.
yes, I was just gonna say, in the narrowest view, it's the team that's going to build tools that allow the engineers to do their jobs better. That's in its narrowest form, but that's also in its myopic form. So when I'm in organizations that are thinking that's DevOps, I would be the person saying there's no such thing as DevOps, because that's a very, very myopic view. For me, it's like you've just shifted the problem somewhere else. You had an operations team, now you have a team that comes from a development background, but still doing the operations separate from what the feature team engineers are doing. Exactly. So in that scenario, that's what some people see a DevOps engineer is. But it's a lot broader than that. It's about the capabilities are also not just the tooling. It's everything about instilling the mindset, embedding those philosophies within the organization.
Perfect. We are out of time. I mean, we actually were about 5 minutes ago. But there are some questions behind you. Not to put you on the spot, panelists, but if we send these to you, would you mind if we answer them in blog format so everyone does get their questions answered, but also everyone does get to enjoy the food and have a few more drinks and network? Is that okay? Perfect. Cool. So before I let you all run in that direction, I want to say a huge thank you to our lovely panelists. To Zainab, to Phyto, to Alge, and to Tamara. I've been calling you Tam all evening. I'm sorry I didn't even ask you. Tam's good. Okay, great. Tam on a nickname basis. We've been able to grow for the last 6 years because we've continuously grown a community around your feedback. The direction we've gone in, what we focused on, the countries we went to. I got to live in California. Thanks, folks. Your feedback, honestly, is so important to us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So please do take the time to scan another QR code and do give us some feedback so we can build better events for you time and time again. But again, a huge thank you. I hope you all enjoyed it. And you can harass very nicely, don't forget that code of conduct, the speakers at the makeshift bar.